What is up everyone, Boschee here, back at it in Raid Shadow Legends, and today I'm going to talk about the 10 times event coming up this weekend. Now these champions on the list seem to be aimed toward Doom Tower, as they are talking about HP burn champions and freeze champions. So you need HP burn champion for the Frost Spider, and then some of the waves it actually helps as well, and then you have the freeze debuff, which will definitely help during hard mode waves so you can CC your way through the floors. But overall, let's go ahead and go through the champions. I'll give my opinion on each one, and then I'll give you a summary in my opinion overall if I think you should be summoning this weekend. But yeah, let's go ahead and jump through it. So first off, we have some high elves. First, we'll go into the Void High Elf of Exemplar. So Exemplar has a double hit on her A2 and then places an extra hit if this attack is critical. So pretty much a triple hit because you're going to be building her with 100% crit anyway. And then you have the A2, attack 3 times at random. Each hit has a 75% chance if you book her of placing a 25% weaken debuff for 2 turns. So not exactly a AoE weaken, especially since it's random, so you can't really control where it goes, but it's something close enough. You can also get this down to a 2-turn cooldown, and Exemplar hits semi-hard, so not a horrible ability, but I do like either a targeted weaken or an AoE weaken. This one can possibly hit the same target twice, so that's kind of a bummer, but it is what it is. And then you have the A3. This ability actually hits extremely hard, but attacks one enemy, has a 100% chance if you book her of placing a freeze debuff for 1 turn and a block cooldown skill debuff for 2 turns. Now the weird part with this is, like, I'm not exactly a huge fan, as it's placing a freeze debuff and a block cooldown skill debuff, so you're only really getting that block cooldown skill for 1 turn really, because they're going to be frozen for the other. And you can just get this down to a 4-turn cooldown. I don't like her as a freeze champion or a CC type champion just because it's only on 1 ability, it's only 1 enemy, and it's a decently long cooldown. Now she does hit hard, so you can bring her in for that, but that means she's also a glass cannon, meaning she's pretty squishy. Overall, if I was summoning during this event, I would not be wanting to aim for her, but if you're looking for some more high elves or something for faction wars or for the secret room, she could actually be a decent candidate. Next we have Shirimani. So Shirimani is a legendary support champion for high elves. Really good speed, and then you have on the A1, attack 3 times at random, has a 15% chance of placing a freeze debuff for 1 turn on each hit. This is actually pretty cool. The whole freeze on random enemies isn't too bad. It is still a low chance, so there is that. The A2, Rejuvenating Wave, heals 1 ally by 50% and other allies by 20% of their max HP, so it's based off of the champions you're running with. And then places a continuous heal buff for 2 turns on targets with full HP. This is nice if you have a specific champion being targeted, can do a 50% heal on them, and then 20% heal on everyone else, which typically will be at close to 100%, which then you can put the continuous heal on and keep them topped off. Overall, this ability is really cool, especially on a 4-turn cooldown. And then you have the hard-hitting ability on Shirimani, which I think she's pretty much known for in Arena, Ice Storm. So attack all enemies, has a 100% chance if you book her of placing a freeze debuff for 1 turn, and then fills this champion's turn meter by 10% for each attacked enemy. So during like waves in Doom Tower, this will be like a 50% turn meter increase. During Arena, it's a 40% increase, but overall, it's a really hard hitting ability and a really good CC ability. She can pair well with a bunch of other freeze champions in order to kind of CC your way through the floors, or if you happen to pull your Carl, which is that new Void legendary, he can pair very well with her as well. Overall, a really good champion, a champion I would actually be willing to go for if I was doing summons during this 10 times. So next we have some barbarians. First we'll do Kallia. Kallia is a partner champion with a tour, so all of her abilities will have something to do with, if you have a tour in your party, she will heal herself for a percentage of the damage she does on all her attacks. But yeah, So on the A1, attack one enemy has a 40% chance if you book her of placing an HP burn debuff for 2 turns. Once, like I said, heals this champion by 20% of the damage inflicted if a tour is on the same team. You have the A2, attack all enemies, has a 50% chance. You can book it up to 75% chance of placing 100% heal reduction for 2 turns. Heal this champion by 10% of the damage inflicted, once again with the tour. And then the A3, attack 3 times at random. Each hit has a 60% chance of placing an HP burn debuff for 2 turns, and heals this champion by 50% if you have a tour. Overall, I don't think she's really worth having, even if you are running a tour. And a tour really is only going to do well on CCing throughout the waves, or maybe using him on the dragon boss in Doom Tower, but even in that sense, you won't really want Kallia in there to place a HP burn, just because the dragon heals off HP burn. Even though she does have the heal reduction, you're still going to have to rely on getting that heal reduction up first and then dealing with it. So overall, not really worth summoning in my opinion. Then next you have a Jotun. So Jotun was on a previous 10 times event when I think they were trying to promote Doom Tower champions. Like I said before, I'll go through his kit real quick, but not an amazing champion, but not a horrible one. So you have the A1 has a 40% chance if you book it of placing the low decrease defense. Not a great one. You really want the high decrease defense if you can. Then you have the A2, attack one enemy, has a 100% chance if you book him of placing the HP burn for 4 turns. So this is actually pretty big if you need an HP burn champion, and that's just because you can lower this down to a 3-turn cooldown but have HP burn up for 4 turns. The big issue with this though is the main boss you want HP burn for is the Frost Spider. And Frost Spider, unless you have Leech on the Spiderlings, is gonna get cleansed. The HP burn will be cleansed. So overall, not very reliable, especially with his AI, because I believe his AI will not place the HP burn unless you have the low decrease defense from his A1. His AI is a little wonky, like I believe I talked about this before, but overall I don't think he's really worth it. And then on the A3, he does have a decreased target's max HP by 30% of damage inflicted, and if that target has HP burn, the damage is increased by 50%. So they're trying to hit, I think, 2 birds with 1 stone with Jotun, because you need a max HP dropper for the Skarg King, and then you need an HP burn champion for the Spider, or the Frost Spider. Overall, like I said, not a horrible champion, but there just are better ones out there. But he does hit decently hard, and he could be pretty cool for Barbarian Faction Wars, but once again, don't really think he's worth summoning for. And then he also has the ally HP and faction crypts by 29%. The last Barbarian is Elder Skarg. So Elder Skarg is a legendary attack champion. Overall, I'll go over his passive first actually. So Kingslayer receives 15% less damage from legendary champions, and then it inflicts damage equal to this champion's attack when attacked by a legendary champion. The extra hit cannot be critical. So this can actually become pretty key during the Doom Tower, and that's just because the Doom Tower floors are filled with legendary champions, so it could be pretty cool to run him in there. We're going to go backwards through his kit because I think it's kind of important. So you have Elder's Clarion, so places a 60% increased defense buff on this champion for 3 turns, and then places a fear debuff on all enemies for 1 turn, place a true fear debuff for 1 turn on targets under block damage buffs, places a 30% decreased speed debuff for 2 turns on targets under shield buffs, and then these debuffs cannot be resisted. Also places a provoke debuff on legendary champions. The provoke is a little bit of an issue just because typically Elder Skarg is built squishy because you want him to hit kind of hard, but it could be kind of clutch in order to get provoke on one of the legendary champions during the waves of Doom Tower. Works very well in PvP though. But yeah, the fear on everyone is a very nice CC possibility. He is doing an increased defense for himself to kind of give him some survivability. But yeah, overall a pretty cool effect, all in all. And then you have the A2, Hunt the Marked. So this one is the one that he's kind of known for and got a huge buff, I believe. but attacks one enemy 3 times, places an extra hit for each buff or debuff on the target, can place up to 3 extra hits, so hitting a total of 6 times, and then places an HP burn debuff for 2 turns and a True Fear debuff for 1 turn on all enemies if this attack places all 3 extra hits. So typically you're going to want to hit a tanky target just to make sure that you're hitting all 6 hits, because if you don't place those 3 extra hits and you happen to kill the target, it will not spread the True Fear and the HP burn, and then steals all the buffs from the target after the attack. This is actually really cool, and a lot of people are starting to use him in Spider 20, just so you guys can put a bunch of debuffs on Spider, use Hunt the Marked, spread the HP burn to all the Spiderlings, along with a True Fear, and then it kind of just burns the Spider a lot. Can be very useful in PvP for CC in this way, and then also, like I said, Doom Tower, once you're in hard mode and you're climbing through the higher floors, you're definitely not going to be one-shotting targets. So you're definitely going to be able to spread that True Fear in the HP burn throughout targets. And if you happen to get Torment from the previous 10 times, that was this past weekend, or if you had Torment from the fusion a long time ago, this can pair well with proccing Torment's passive of using his A1 every time a freeze and HP burn are on the same target. But overall, not a bad champion. And then his A1 is pretty simple. Attack one enemy, places a increased speed buff on this champion if it's critical, and it does a increased crit rate buff if it's not critical. But overall, not a bad champion. Pretty cool one, actually. I use him in some of my PvP matches, and he works pretty well. And he does very well in faction wars as well. So that is it for Barbarian. Next we have the Ogryn tribe. So Ogryn, we have 2 legendaries actually. So first we'll go with the Void. He's actually one of my favorite champions, Gurgoh the Augur. So he is like the CC champion, the freeze champion. Really cool kit. So on his A1, attack one enemy 2 times, places an extra hit if the target has a freeze debuff, so pretty much a triple hit. On his A2, you have Bone Chiller, removes 2 random buffs from all enemies, and then has a 100% chance if you book him of placing a freeze debuff on all enemies for 1 turn, and then grants an extra turn. So this is actually really nice. So you pretty much start out with Bone Chiller, remove 2 random buffs on the target, typically a shield buff or increased defense buff or something like that. Especially in PvP, you're taking off those shield buffs pretty much, and then you're getting the extra turn where you can use the A1 or the A3, and typically it's going to be the A3. So A3 is Avalanche, attack one enemy, places an extra hit if the target has a freeze debuff, and then you can drop this down to 5 turns if you book it. And Avalanche actually hits very hard. I believe if I use him in PvP, he hits anywhere for like 24k per hit. And so he's pretty much hitting for like 50 or 60k on a frozen target, depending on the defense, obviously. And then you have the passive, which is pretty much a built-in frost set. So it has a 50% chance of placing a freeze debuff on the attacker for 1 turn if this champion loses more than 20% of their max HP on 1 attack, which pairs well with the rest of his kit, right? And then you have ally attack and faction crips by 44%. So if you're having issues getting through waves in Doom Tower or even in faction wars, Gurgoh is a really good champion to use. Because of the Bone Chiller, you can get this down to a 4-turn cooldown, and I mean, along with masteries and stuff, you can drop this down extremely low and just keep on freezing waves, and pairs very well with other freeze champions. So one of my favorite champions in the game, actually. The next one is actually going to be someone that everyone wants, and that is Ignatius. So this is actually a champion I really want, but like I said, I'll go over if I think you guys should summon this weekend. But on his A1, he has attack one enemy, has a 15% chance, can book it to 25% chance of placing a stun debuff for 1 turn. Having a stun on the A1 is actually always nice to have some type of CC on the A1. You have the A2, attack all enemies, has a 75% chance if you book it of placing a provoke debuff for 1 turn. This can be really nice, especially for Doom Tower, once again, and Faction Wars, just because it's a CC and he's a defense champion, so he's going to be able to take the hits very easily. And then what he's known for is A3, Turn to Ash. So attack all enemies has a 100% chance if you book it of placing HP burn debuff for 2 turns, and this debuff cannot be resisted. So typically you would not need to build accuracy on him just because of this ability, but you do have the provoke and you have the stun. But overall, if you're really just using him for damage and for placing HP burn, you can really forego the accuracy on him and just build a bunch of defense and speed, and he'll do fine. But yeah, he's extremely good, I believe. I've seen him solo spider or duo spider with someone else, the frost spider that is for Doom Tower. So extremely good champion. And then you have an ally defense in all battles by 25%, which helps even more because that can be used anywhere. So overall, an extremely good champion. Actually, one of the champions I want most in the game just because of the way he looks. But yeah, overall, not a bad champion whatsoever. And then the last champion we're going to talk about is Luria. So Luria is a Dark Elf Epic. Pretty good champion overall, but on the A1, attack one enemy has a 50% chance. You can book it up to 75% chance of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff, or 100% heal reduction, or a 30% decreased speed. I'm not a big fan of this ability because there's a lot of ores, so you don't know what debuff you're getting, so you can't reliably depend on for a decreased defense or speed or heal reduction. Obviously, you'd probably aim for the decreased defense or the speed, but like I said, it's a chance of getting a random one, so not that great in my opinion. Then you have the A2, which is where her freeze comes into play. Mark of Fear, attack all enemies, has a 75% chance if you book it of placing a freeze debuff for 1 turn. Enemies killed by the skill cannot be revived. This is a very nice thing, especially for things like Ice Golem or even some of the waves in Doom Tower, because they do have resers, and actually hits decently hard. And then you have the last ability, Hex. Attack one enemy, removes all buffs. Also has a 100% chance if you book it of placing block buffs debuff for 2 turns. Not an amazing ability, and it's on a 5-turn cooldown. Overall, she isn't a bad champion, but she requires a lot of books overall, and she's really only useful for her A2. And unless you're building her to hit extremely hard or manualing through, it's going to be kind of hard to land that block revive. So not a bad champion. Pretty cool champion overall, but not really worth it in my opinion. So overall, do I think you guys should be summoning during this event? The only ones that I feel like are really worth going for are Gurgoh, which, I mean, Gurgoh's a void, so the only other person in that pool is going to be Exemplar. But like I said, I think when I was talking about Exemplar, she's really not worth it. So in my opinion, I'd avoid the void champions or the void shards. I'm sure not a lot of people have void shards, especially after this 2 times event that just happened anyways. And when it comes to the ancients and the sacreds, the only one I think worth going for are the 2 legendaries. So you have Shirimani, which is really cool. She can help out in faction wars, PvP, and Doom Tower. Doom Tower waves, or I mean floors, I should say. So even if you do get her, she's not going to do amazing on boss fights. And then the last one is Ignatius. Ignatius does well everywhere. Does well in PvP, faction wars, Doom Tower, and Doom Tower bosses. So overall, there is only like a handful, not even a handful of champions worth getting for this 10 times event. And with the 2 times ancient event coming up next week, I definitely don't think it's worth summoning. Unfortunately, I always like opening shards for events, but this one, there's just too many bad champions, and the good ones are all legendary. So unfortunately, I'm gonna have to give this 10 times a no-go for you guys. But like I said, you guys do what you want. If you feel like you really want to go toward Ignatius, I would definitely try to go for him. He's like an extremely good champion, but all in all, definitely don't think it's worth it. But that's all I have for you guys. I will talk to you guys later in the next video, and I hope you guys are doing well. See ya.